What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 49, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by my two good friends and co-hosts, Roffle and Corbett. How are you guys doing tonight, friends?
Doing great. I'm excited to talk about some pretty exciting news for the Wild format. How about you, Corb?
I'm feeling fantastic. I got my first haircut in nearly a year, and it was much needed. And I'm feeling like that's the really big news of the week for me, I think. There's nothing really that can trump that for me so far.
Yeah, nothing else important happened this week other than Corbett got a haircut. Literally, it's really weird looking at you and not having like hair in your eyes and like watching you mess with your hair all.
I think we can all agree that this is big news for all of us.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Yeah,
100%.
It's definitely what we should lead the show with. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, Roffle hinted at some pretty big stuff. But before we get into all that, we do have a couple of housekeeping things to take care of first. The first thing, obviously, very small thing. If you guys enjoy our content, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any podcast distributors. It's a very small thing, but it does actually support us a ton.
Yeah, you can also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/stateofwild. And I'd like to do a quick shout out for some of our newest patrons. At the Epic tier, we have Juicy Toaster, Atrov Rocky, Turtle Boy, and Roffle Stomp. And then our newest legendary patron is Johnny Clum.
And guys, as patrons, you can always link your Patreon and Discord when you come over to the podcast community Discord. That is open though to everyone. The podcast server for the State of Wild just opened up last week, so get in while it's hot. Get in. It's been a lot of fun, like having a whole bunch of new faces, being able to talk to everyone that's listening to the show and all that kind of stuff, and discuss all the goings on of Wild Hearthstone and just life in general, I guess.
Yeah. And the last thing that we want to talk about, this is a little bit of a personal thing, but I wanted to shout it out because I feel like a lot of you guys might be interested. I'm actually hosting a huge WoW tournament, free to enter next weekend on the 19th, with a $600 prize pool put on by Community Gaming. So shout outs to them for helping me out with this. But yeah, free to play, huge tournament. I know the Wild scene is always lacking in competitive events, right? We don't have Masters Tours and qualifiers every day to look forward to. So if you guys are interested, regardless of your skill level, or anything like that, make sure you guys check it out. The link to that will be down in the description. It is, again, free to enter. All you have to do, I think, is to win 5 games, you're in the money, and if you win 6, you're the grand champion, right? So make sure you guys check that out if you're interested. And if you're not, and you just want to watch, that'll be streamed over on my Twitch channel with these two lovely guys here helping me co-cast this tournament. I'm really, really looking forward to that. So all the housekeeping stuff out of the way, let's get into the big news. We had some pretty kind of groundbreaking news this week. Hearthstone history, if I say so. We had our first ban ever in Hearthstone history. We saw Stealer of Souls banned in the Wild format. So this is something that we brought up last week as like a possibility if they didn't want to do these other things. On Friday, right? Friday afternoon, we saw this announcement from the Play Hearthstone website, our Twitter account. We'll be banning Stealer of Souls in Wild in a small update next week. Stealer of Souls will still be playable in other formats and will be eligible for a full dust refund for 2 weeks after the change goes live. And it'll be going live next Wednesday. And then Alec followed up with a follow-up tweet kind of clarifying the process of a ban, stating that the current plan is to adjust the card at the point in time and remove the ban. So basically, once Stealer of Souls rotates from Standard to Wild, they'll re-evaluate the card, see if it needs to remain banned, or if they need to adjust it and unban it. And if any adjustments happen to Stealer of Souls before that, example, if it needs to get nerfed because of Standard, they'll reevaluate its inclusion in Wild post-nerf. So yeah, first ever ban, Stealer of Souls gets that infamous mark, in Hearthstone history. I mean, just first off, reactions to the big announcement.
I'm personally excited. I mean, we kind of alluded to this as a possibility, but it was under the context of it being a bit of a long shot, right? Like we kind of had it as a wish list rather than, well, this is probably what'll happen, and it ended up happening. And then, I've been thinking a lot about this. We talked last week at length about possible changes to the cards and some of the consequences of those changes to the cards. And really, the agreement that we came to is there was no agreement on how to fix this card without like either, changing underlying Hearthstone mechanics, which I'm always a little bit hesitant to do just because, that's 7 years of established rules, or like absolutely neutering the card to the point where it's unplayable in standard, which is effectively deleting it or banning it anyway. Like the same outcome ends up being that nobody plays the card. So in general, I think this is a good thing. It does a few things. It obviously it solves some of the unhealthy playstyles that were prevalent for the past week or so in the wild format. It keeps the card intact for standard and other formats, which independently, Steal of Souls is a pretty cool card. It shouldn't be punished for the sins of wild and the broad card pool that's available in the wild format. So I feel like a ban is the cleanest, simplest solution to a card that is problematic in exactly one format. I also like the idea of revisiting the card when it rotates, as well as if any future changes come out. So realistically, this isn't a permanent ban for the card. We lose the card for about a year and a half or so until rotation happens. And then realistically, we'll probably get a new version of it that doesn't completely ruin the format for a while. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I've been hearing the ban suggestion more recently. Like, I know it's probably been out there for a very long time, but I think like Martian posted it on Twitter a bit, and I saw him talking about the ban list potential. And then like Roffle and like we all talked about it, and Roffle talked about it in depth on last week's episode. And the more like I thought about it, I came away from the show and I was doing streams and I was thinking about it. I'm like, this is the thing that definitely makes the most sense. Like, this is the most logical move to me. I just don't know if they'll do it. And then they ended up doing it. And so I think this is probably the biggest change up for Wild since like opening up the option of reverting nerfs in general. So like Raza and things like that. This is that level of shakeup for the format moving forward. And it's great. Like, this makes sense. Happy they're doing it. Has really, really important long-term ramifications. And I realize there are some downsides for people, but I think it greatly is outweighed by all the benefits that we get out of this.
I mean, let's talk about those long-term ramifications a little bit, like just to clarify for a lot of people, because when I saw this announcement, the amount of kind of backlash to it that I saw in Discords and Twitters and Reddit was kind of insane. Bans don't replace nerfs, I think, is the big thing that people need to take away from this. If there's a card in Standard that is still, doing dumb things in Standard and in Wild, it is very reasonable that we might see a nerf to that card. For example, First Day of School, right? If it was still oppressive in Standard at 1 mana, add 3, and it was still doing broken things in Wild, we could have seen a nerf, right? It wasn't because of Wild, I think we saw that First Day of School nerf, but that's just like an example. If there's like a Wild specific card that is doing dumb broken things, I don't think you're going to see a ban to that card. I think you'll see a nerf to that card, right? I think the big thing is that when you have a Wild specific card and you nerf it, you're not making it completely unplayable in other formats, right? Like what you would be doing to Stealer of Souls if you nerf that card. You would be making it unplayable.
This doesn't replace nerfs. This replaces a very specific nerf, which is, like a card that is problematic in Wild and while still being in Standard. So the most recent and I think only other example of this is really Darkglare, that I can think of, where, if they had have gone back in time and, had this in mind, a ban list, they could have easily just banned Darkglare in Wild and kept it at 3 mana. Darkglare might have still ended up being a problem in Standard because Zoo was very good and Darkglare is kind of insane, but they could have always revised that decision at some point later and eventually done the nerf because it's a digital card game. That's some of the absolute benefits that you have in this sort of flexible environment.
No, I think that the understanding the context of why a ban was chosen for this specific case is important for setting your expectations moving forward, because like the expectation isn't see broken card, ask for ban. Or shouldn't be, at least. Like, you shouldn't be mentally or quite literally setting up a ban wish list right now with cards that don't fit the same context as a Stealer of Souls, because it's not going to happen. There's no reason, like Meow said, for a card that is Wild exclusive to get banned from the format. You're not going to lose Loatheb completely when like a change to Lothab doesn't impact other formats like a change to Steel or Souls would. So we could just see a change to Lothab. We could see a change to Sorcerer's Apprentice. We don't need to delete those cards that have some nostalgia attached to them, and it would be a bummer to lose them. Like, that's part of the reason why a card like Plot Twist wasn't changed for the sake of Steel or Souls, is because we'd lose the nostalgia attached to Plot Twist and like the interactions that it has with other cards that aren't problematic. So like I think understanding when and why a card is banned is important for setting expectations moving forward. What this allows for is it gives the design team more freedom to take risks in the cards that they release, with a solution in place if that happens to break an interaction that's in Wild. With Eternal formats, as the card pool expands, there are going to be more and more interactions like these that couldn't be predicted given the timeline of the content schedule that they're at right now. So we can't ask them not to miss these things. They're human. They're going to miss things. They're going to release cards for Standard that are going to break Wild. What we can ask for and expect, and we now have precedent for, is a timely response to those cards in the way of something like a ban, or in the case of Hysteria, rework with that. So like that's the expectation that I think we need to have, that if something gets printed for Standard and it breaks Wild, that we can get now a timely resolution to that, rather than having to just suck it up and wait for a nerf and then have Standard people unhappy that the card that was perfectly fine in their format is now ruined. I think the expectation setting is important, because this is a unique case, a specific context, and we shouldn't, just because this happened, expect more bans, especially looking back in hindsight to cards that currently exist, especially those only in the Wild format.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. We should not expect any cards that are already released to be banned. I think that's something that a lot of people, like, I see ban wish lists on Twitter and Reddit, and I'm just like, don't know about that one. Don't think any of the cards on there are looking to get banned. I do want to have a little bit of this conversation, though. A lot of people were asking, like, why not just give us different versions of cards, right, rather than a straight up ban? And we talked about this last week, but I do want to bring it back up and clarify it again. I feel like a lot of the people that listen to the podcast or are on Twitter or on Reddit are much more engaged with the format than they're willing to admit, right? You're going out of your way to consume content. And I know, Roffle, you probably experience this a lot more than I do, but I still have people that come into my chat wondering, wait, I thought they unnerfed Leroy to 4 mana, right? Because of Classic. And I just think that when you have different versions of cards, you're going to be kind of cutting off such a significant portion of the casual player base, just because, oh my god, everything is different. I don't know what this card is. I thought this card was 6 mana and said it's 5, or I don't think that that's the smart move to go, and so that's why I'm a big fan of the ban announcement. I don't know if you guys, Roffle, you probably kind of agree with me. I know we talked a little bit about this last week, but
I am aggressively opposed to multiple versions of the same card, especially in two constructed formats like Wild and Standard that have overlap between them. Like Classic, it's less of a concern because like there's the understanding that these are the unnerved versions of the cards. But I just today had somebody suggesting I play around Elysiana in my opponent's Odd Warrior deck. Like changing cards and having multiple versions of the same cards over the course of time is already difficult enough. Having those different versions of the cards operating simultaneously is just not like a reasonable expectation for your more casual player base. And I think it has the downside of also making the Wild format a little bit like less approachable, because you are more familiar with the standard or a typical version of that card. You get into Wild and that card's now different. Well, why? Like that, and also like even from a thematic point of view, as a card game player, why is this the same card if it's different, like in these different formats as well? So there are a lot of things that like I really do not like the concept of having multiple versions of the same card for all of those reasons that are listed, and just like I don't see the benefit to that. If just give it if you're going to do that, I would say maybe just give it a new name, some new art, and make it wild exclusive, and that's maybe fine. But like having multiple, like we did with Bluegill and Stone Tusk Ward, like that would maybe be more of a solution. But like I still don't feel like that's necessary, or if you're going to nerf a card to the point where it's unplayable in the case of Stealer Souls, and then make a new wild specific version of that, if it's not being played, how is that different than banning the card if you just like outright neutered it? So like, what is the material difference between those two things, between banning a card and nerfing it to the point where it no longer does the thing that it used to do?
Yeah, I think that's my big thing. Like, if you're going to have a wild exclusive card and you're changing how it functions and make it unplayable, why not just ban it? Right? Like, I guess that's my point with that, because that just makes it unnecessarily confusing for standard players that want to come back to wild anyways. I don't know, Corbett, I saw a look on your face. Do you disagree?
Oh no, like I think not even from a casual perspective, like just me, I don't want like multiple versions of cards at all. I think this, like Roffle said, something inherently sort of weird and wrong about like the same card having multiple versions across different game modes, because it's then not really the same card. This feels really weird to me. I also think there's probably like some design issues and things like that could come up when you have like multiple cards to design around in the two different formats. Like the fact that cards could interact differently with certain other things feels like it might make things even more difficult from the design perspective. This is like a minor thing. For example, they make like a new synergy card that works really well with like a 2-mana apprentice, but they balance it around a 3-mana apprentice or something like that, assuming there were different versions. But yeah, I just don't like the different version idea. I like the ban list. I think it's a lot simpler. I think it's a lot cleaner. And I don't think we functionally lose out on anything, really, by making that change.
And like, if about a year from now we'll have that watered down version of Stealer Souls anyway, so like long term we end up with that wild specific copy of the card anyway. But maybe taking or considering the format a little bit more than it was when it was initially released. So like that's the end point anyway. But having those things live simultaneously, I think, is what I have a concern with. I'm not opposed to changing cards because it is a digital card game. Having those copies or having two different versions of the same card live simultaneously is just not something that I would like to have, both for me and for the more casual player base that maybe isn't listening to this podcast or isn't reading Twitter or Reddit every day.
All right, I think we're all in agreement about the ban. I do want to pose a couple of cons just to kind of think about. I think the first one we pointed out again last week is that it does now feel like we only had 34 cards that were revealed with the mini set now, because we had one of them banned. We at least got to play with one of them, right, before it got banned for like a week and a half. But it does raise the question of, okay, what if they go in and they start designing cards and they say, okay, I'm going to preemptively ban this card in Wild, right? Like, I know this is going to be broken in Wild. It's going to be banned. And so in future sets, we might have one or two fewer cards to play with. I know this is me playing devil's advocate to a ban. I don't think that's a valid concern, but it does, I think, feel a little bit bad that we will have fewer cards to potentially play with in the future.
I did mention this yesterday, and not yesterday, last week when we were discussing it, and it is a bummer. Like it kind of feels bad, but I think the framing of it is important. First of all, as we talked about, is nerfing a card to the point of non-existence any different in terms of the outcome compared to banning a card? Probably not, if that card's not being played. In the Wild format, we have a wider card pool than standard, so we already get more cards at our disposal. It's a bummer that we get fewer new cards, but like just based on the power level of cards that are released, it's an inherent part of a Eternal format that we get fewer cards effectively with each expansion, because they're just going to be some that were present or that are released with the power level of standard in mind that just cannot see play in Wild because they're not good cards. So like it's the same thing there. So it feels bad to have something taken away from you, but does that feel worse than playing against a bunch of Stealer of Soul Warlocks all day? Like that's the question that I would pose as a retort to that is which one feels worse? Having one less card when as part of the format you're already sort of getting fewer cards anyway because of the relative power level. Does that feel worse than non-games that come out of a card like a Stealer of Souls?
I don't care in the slightest. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I just could not care less about. They took one card away out of my 33 after it got like played in a deck that was worth banning. I don't care. It makes my experience better. The majority of cards don't see play anyway in Wild. We have thousands of things. 1/35 of something getting taken away from me, or like in a full expansion, 1 out of 135 cards. I don't care. I realize other people care. I don't. So I'm sorry, that's harsh, but yeah.
No, yeah. The result is that I don't care. I'm happier with the ban, but I understand at the same point that like from a player perspective, especially for the Wild format where it already feels like less attention is being paid, it's human nature to feel worse about having something taken away from you than not having that thing given to you to begin with. So I understand the people's reaction, the player base's reaction to this. I would just ask them to again reframe the situation and pose that question. Well, is having one less card worse than playing against a bunch of Stealer Souls decks? And I would say, no, it's not. I want to play greedy decks on ladder every once in a while. I don't, I don't want to lose on turn 5, and I don't want my opponent to concede because they didn't draw their cards in the right order off a plot twist. I feel like that's just a really dumb way to play a card game.
All right. I think one last con that I want to pose that I saw brought up, we kind of maybe posed it as a pro. They get to take more risk now, right? Now that they have this emergency ban option for cards, they get to take more risk for cards in Standard, right? That have the potential to do dumb things now in Wild, because if it's too dumb, we can ban it. And do you think that this maybe is going to have an influence on card design moving forward where, okay, well, now every expansion we're going to have something that does something super broken, super dumb, and, we're just, if it's strong enough, we'll ban it. Or if it's ubiquitous enough, we'll ban it. If not, then it's like there in the format. And is that necessarily a bad thing? Is another question that I'll pose to that. But yeah, your thoughts to that.
I had this discussion at length today on my stream, and I would not position that as a con at all. Hearthstone is 7 years old. What? 8-ish? I don't know. Hearthstone is an old game. If they're just releasing cards that have repetitive mechanics and aren't interesting enough to potentially break Wild, the game's going to get stale. Like, I want the design team to feel like they can take risks with the card, because risks are how you get interesting cards. Sometimes the result of that is going to be a broken format, and sometimes that format is going to be Wild and is going to be very broken when it happens. But I would rather them take the risk, and I'll just stomach it for a week and then know that they have a solution to that. Like, again, for the health of the game, I think we want the designers to take risks, because risks are necessary for interesting cards. Like the potential for mana cheating creates fun things in Hearthstone. It also has the potential to create like obnoxious broken things. So I don't want them to, be too conservative with some of the cards that they release, because that's how you can get some fun new mechanics. So I would position that as a good thing. I like the fact that they now, as a team, have a solution to when something is inevitably broken in Wild, because given the expanding card pool, it's only going to happen more frequently, and we've only been seeing it happen more frequently. Now we have a timely reaction to that when it does happen.
I think even if you frame it as a negative for Wild, because you think that, okay, if they're making more risk, it means that there's more cards being taken away, and I don't like that. And it also means that more often we're going to be suffering through a weak expansion launch of Stealer stuff. Even if that's true, it still makes it better, I think, for the game as a whole with like standard in mind. And so overall, as a wild player, it might suck slightly. Like I can see how someone might feel like that, but I think for the health of the game overall. But again, even in wild, I still see it as a positive personally. Like I still think it's great. I just think that overall, it can only really be a good thing.
And how many people are really introduced to Hearthstone through the wild format too? So that's a consideration that we need to have too. Like, yeah, established players maybe move over to wild as their cards rotate, but I would venture to guess that not a lot of the new players are immediately attached to wild just because they're joining the game later and they don't have the backlog of cards to fill in. So you need exciting mechanics to gain new or even sometimes returning players that might then want to revisit the wild format to see some of their old cards that they do have when they log back into their account. So I agree that there's more to Hearthstone than the wild format, but even through the lens of just the wild format, I think like risk taking with card design is a good thing.
And I would also kind of add on to this is like, yeah, we're worried about the fringe case scenarios where it does break the format, but I feel like every time you get one card that breaks the format, you're going to have maybe 2 or 3 that create or enhance really interesting archetypes, I think. Like, I mean, Primal Dungeoneer could have been a risky card, right? Giving a class whose only weakness is card draw, really, and giving it really, really powerful card draw had the potential to be risky, right? It's a little bit of a, maybe not the same case scenario as Sealer of Souls with the effect that it's having, but I think just from this mini set, we had a ban-worthy card, but we also had this really, really powerful, interesting card that got introduced. And I feel like if you allow them to take more risk, you'll have one that gets banned every once in a while, but you'll also have 2 or 3 or 4 that create really, really interesting decks or really, really interesting cards for specific archetypes. So I'm in the same boat as you guys. I don't really necessarily think this is a con. This is just something that I saw brought up as a con to the ban announcement, and so I wanted to bring that up. But yeah, I think we witnessed history on Friday, right? This will go down as the first ban in Hearthstone history. Hopefully not of many, but... So that's our little conversation about the ban. I do want to go ahead, not to get anybody's hopes up, but they did say patch notes will be shared on Tuesday. Maybe there will be some other interesting goodies for us in that patch. Highly doubt it, but maybe. Fingers crossed. But the patch itself is going to go live on Wednesday. So we have 3 or 4 more days of Stealer Warlock, but I think as a community we can get through it together. Either get all your games in while you can, or just don't play the game for the next 3 or 4 days and come back on Wednesday once it's patched out of the game. But yeah, so other than the ban, we've had another week to kind of see how the meta itself has developed post mini set. I know it really just feels like Shaman versus Stealer Warlocks as like the only 2 things that have come out of the mini set. But Corbett, I know you love HS Replay. You love the stats. Is there anything out there that looks really, really good post mini set now that the meta's had a little bit of time to settle that we should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, like I think obviously there's the Stealer stuff, right? And we should at least acknowledge what happened with Stealer, like post expansion launch, before we get into some of the other things. So the thing what happened with Stealer is it came out of the gates with like a 30% play rate at Legend, or at like Diamond and up. And then it kind of declined, and then it completely leveled out. And I think that's obviously why the team probably felt they had to ban this thing, because it wasn't declining. Like the deck had settled out at about a 18 to 20% play rate a lot of the time at like higher ranks, and it wasn't going down anymore after those first few days. So Stealer Warlock obviously being the big thing, and it wasn't going away. But in terms of like other things that we got, Shaman's actually really good, I think, and it's kind of bizarre where it doesn't really matter how you want to do it, whether you want to do it in a pure Shadowwalk build, if you want to do it with like Galakrond, and probably can do it in other ways. If you play like Elementals, the new Elemental package that we got with Primal Dungeoneer, and you play Toxfin Flurgle and Ice Fishing, apparently you just have a good deck, which is very baffling to me and not at all what I was expecting. But Shaman decks have really good win rates right now, like really, really good. I look at the stuff every expansion, and I think based on the like what I always see, it feels like there's zero chance that this deck isn't like tier 2 or like higher. It's really weird.
Yeah, so you're talking about like all kinds of like shaman decks, right? So specifically like the slower shaman decks, but
yeah, specifically there's a list posted from Kronos. He posted a Galakrond elemental deck that caught on. It wasn't playing Devoted Maniac, it wasn't playing Shield of Galakrond, it was running Kazakus. But that deck has a really good win rate, and I think it can also be refined a bit further. But so that deck is one of the best in the format, apparently, on Pages Replay. But there's also other things, like a normal Shadowwalk build that's like pure combo, running like double Saronite, running like Dirty Rats, things like that. And that deck is also doing really well. So I'm baffled, to be honest. I didn't think this was going to be happening. I didn't think I'd be looking at this stuff, because decks that have this high win rate this early, like, yeah, it's not 100% trustworthy and things change, but it's pretty impossible for it to become like bad and not just be outright good. So these decks are solid no matter how you want to do it. And there might be more shells. Like I said, there's only these two, but I think Shaman as a whole has a lot of room for exploration.
Well, I think something interesting about this too is these decks aren't ending the game on turn 5 or 6 either. So they may be like, are they really benefiting from a 20% Soul Stealer Souls Warlock metagame right now? So like, is there potential upside when we lose the Stealer of Souls decks, I guess is my question.
Yeah, at the moment they look okay, but not great into Warlock. It depends on what build exactly. Because they do have that Flurgle Toxin package, and so while they can get blown up by the Mechathune, they do have like a really, really clean answer into like the make a big board version of the deck, where it goes all in and, you know, vomits out Mal'Ganis, and then you're just like, oh, Flurgle Toxin. But it does have weaknesses overall. It doesn't seem like the Shaman decks are great into Mage, specifically probably Secret Mage, because it just gets under it and bursts it down, doesn't have healing. But like a lot of these Galakrond decks, they look very well rounded. They have like a pretty even keeled matchup spread, you know, mid-rangey stuff. They handle aggro well. They put on just enough pressure that they don't like auto lose to Priest. There's things running like Lilypad Lurker, so you have like a bit more game against like big decks. They're just like very well rounded overall, and definitely I think like once Stealer goes away, players will probably be more willing to play these decks, because even if they're good right now, they might feel bad to lose to Mechathune. Like, they're not very fun to get comboed off and die. And so, you know, if there's a lot less of that going around, players are probably going to be more willing to play some of that slower stuff.
Yeah, I've actually been having a lot of success with a variety of Shaman decks, right? So I've been playing Aggro Shaman with the new Wailing Vapor that's been really, really strong, with a Primal Dungeoneer draw engine. But, like, I think this last week I have played like 10 or 11 different decks, and I think 8 or 9 of them are different varieties of Shaman, just because Primal Engineer allows so much random stuff to be viable. Like, I've played a Shudderwalk build. I don't think the pure Shudderwalk stuff is good, but I have played it. I played a lot of the Galakrond Shudderwalk shell, so I've played like an Evolve version, a Jade version, like 7 or 8 different versions of the deck. So like, I think like an Evolve shell with Primal Dungeoneer is something to keep an eye on, because Evolve itself and Mutate are both nature spells. Not Revolve, don't run Revolve because it's not nature. Run Evolve and Mutate. But yeah, dude, I'm excited for this Warlock ban, because I feel like Shaman itself is just gonna be, it's gonna be fun, and it's gonna be interesting to see if it can stay on top once people actually like realize like that it's powerful and start playing stuff that is good against it. I've been assuming stuff like Odd Warrior. If you're not playing the pure combo build, is probably pretty good into the Shaman decks. Rena Priest as well. I'm not sure how that matchup feels. It's felt pretty miserable from the Shaman end, but maybe that's because I've been getting pole kilted on 5. But I will say the one thing that I have seen a lot of Shamans do that I think we need to stop doing is stop running Mutanus in your Shaman decks, because you're screwing up the one reason that the class is good, which is the Ice Fishing Toxin Flurkle. And you're screwing that up by running Mutanus. So please don't run that in your deck. It's like actively hindering your win rate. Please stop.
No, I like eating minions from my opponent's hand. You're not going to stop me from playing.
No, this is going to be another Ticketus scenario where like...
Okay, well, hear me out. What if we also run Zola so that you can bounce the Mutanus? Then you get 2.
Think about it.
I'm thinking about it, and Roffle, I hate you. Please stop giving people ideas.
No, I think Ticketus is a fair comparison because it has not only is it like not a good card when you play it, but it has that same anti-synergy with ice fishing that Ticketus has with Void Caller, which is like, again, Void Caller is the thing that makes Warlock and specifically Reno Lock good. So you're making that good thing less consistent to add a bad thing that's bad independently. So like, yeah, no, if you want to win games, stop running Mutanus. It's fun. I enjoy it. But I know that it's making my deck worse when I do run it. Like,
Uh-oh. Don't you dare tell me! Don't you dare tell me that people should be running. No, Corbett, don't you dare.
I would want to look at the math.
No,
like,
don't do it.
I would want to look at the numbers and say like,
No.
okay, if you run a third Murloc, with the ice fishing, how often does that actually hinder you from getting like the 2-card combo? Because I mean, if you get the ice fishing and you already draw a Murloc, then you still get the 2 pieces in hand.
So that was. I thought about that as well because like it's one less potential dead card, or like you draw one additional card from the ice fishing. But like,
yeah,
the question then I think you need to ask yourself is, well, is Mutanus is drawing Mutanus first of all a good thing? Second of all, is it better than having your other Murloc be something like a prize vendor or a Cold Light Oracle just instead, if you're depending on what type of build you're running? Like, if you're going to run a third Murloc, why does it have to be a 7-mana Murloc? I guess would be my follow-up to that.
Because you get to eat minions from your opponent's hand.
Yeah, I think Mutanus does have some value as like in a Shadowwalk deck type thing. Like, I don't think the card is hopeless, and if it is like a free draw sometimes to make that ice fishing consistent, again, I'd want to actually just look at the math before I commit one way or the other. I'm just gonna be on defense on this one. You guys can take the fall if Mutanus ends up being correct and stuff. Whatever, it's fine. I'm out of the clear.
That's fair. I'm willing to take the risk that I die on that hill, but I'm also willing to take the risk that the card's bad and I continue playing it because it's fun. Like, I like chowing down on my opponent's minions. So like,
win-win, all right?
Either way, I'm gonna keep playing the card. I don't care if it's good or not.
Yeah, I'm notorious for hating fun, and I'm also notorious for hating when people Mutanus me, and so I really don't think that it's good. Obviously this is my impression from playing a lot of Shaman and playing against a lot of Shaman, where like only in the like Reno Shutterwalk Shaman mirrors does the Mutanus feel like it matters, right? Very similar to like Ticketus feels like it only really matters in the control mirrors, which is just not super prevalent in our format. And so yeah. I again, Corbett, once you run the numbers, let me know. But I am on the boat of like, I don't think that the card is good. I get that it's fun, but I hate fun, and so please stop running Mutanus, okay?
I talked about this a little bit last week, and first, like, as an aside for Mutanus, I had a weird thing going on today where I was absolutely playing him, and every single time myself or my opponent played the Mutanus, he ate another Murloc. Like, he was just cannibalizing other Murlocs. Like, I had Mutanuses eating Mutanus, as well as in both directions, Mutanus eating Cold Light Oracle. Is this bizarre scenario where no matter how many minions were in hand, he always ate a Murloc. But I think that something that was brought up last week, and I want to reemphasize about Mutanus, is that I do not think he is an anti-combo card. And so if you are running him, I could see it as a response to maybe some of these Shutterwalk decks catching on, rather than as a way to disrupt a Reno Priest or a specifically like a Malygos or Celestial Druid. The reason being is that at 7 mana, he's just too slow to like actually snipe a win condition with how the speed at which wild decks actually combo. Maybe he hits a Mizaki if you get lucky, but they have a lot of redundancy in the minions that they hold it in hand. Where he tends to shine is just removing resources from the opponent, just as like in a control mirror. Like if Reno Mage comes back, to a lesser extent if Reno Priest comes back, just because at worst he eats a ping from the opponent's hand from the late game damage. I could see Mutanus being relevant just as a way to remove a resource from the opponent, like not as like to snipe a combo piece. I don't think that's realistic for him.
All right. So besides the Shaman, so I'm again, before we move on, I am very excited that they printed Primal Dungeoneer. Like, I absolutely love this card, and I think last week we talked about how it had single-handedly kind of brought back Shaman in Standard. It, I think, honestly has kind of single-handedly brought back Shaman in Wild as well. For us, it's a little bit different, right? There are some decks that are using it as the 3-mana draw too, but I think it's also... Corbett brought this up, and the more I thought about it, the more I really, really liked it, just as a way to tutor spells in Shaman, right? So tutor the Ice Fishing, tutor, if you're running the Galakron, like tutor the Invocation of Frost. If you're running a Shudderwalk build, you can like tutor specific spells. And I think going in with both mindsets has been really, really kind of eye-opening for how powerful that card can be. And I will say that I think it single-handedly brought back Shaman in our format as well.
Yeah, and I think that, like you alluded to earlier, it was maybe a risky card to print for that reason, because it's like a Draconid Operative type card where like it is incredibly broken for its time. And really it was kind of like that it was that meme of like, deck broken, let's slap this bad boy on there, that'll seal it up. And the Operative was kind of the same way. But yeah, like it's made, I've been playing almost I can't stop playing Shaman either. I have to like make an effort to play other classes just because I want to shove a Primal Dungeoneer on 3 every game or whatever turn I have it. Like yeah, like I've been playing a lot of Shaman. The aggro elemental Shaman is incredible for like 1300 dust. Like I could not stop winning games with that deck. And then on top of that, there's a lot of fun things that you can do just with the way Shaman kind of is as a class with the Shudderwalk potential and whatnot. So yeah, Primal Dungeoneer is awesome. Shaman is a lot of fun and cool card.
All right, Corbett, hit us up with the rest of this meta report. What else is looking really, really strong post mini set?
New cards. All right, that's the entire report for the new cards. In terms of like old stuff, though, I mean, it's mostly like things that do well against Stealer Warlock. Like Stealer Warlock population, like I said, it's still very, very high. It didn't decline nearly as hard as I was anticipating, and things like that. And so the stuff that wins is currently, you know, Secret Mage is really good. Odd DH is quite solid. Odd Paladin. Like those kinds of decks, like Pirate Warrior, Dark Glare Warlock, still really good. Whole bunch of stuff like that. So same old for the most part. The Priest win rates look not great, but they'll bounce back, I'm pretty sure. Like Reno Priest in particular, looks pretty iffy right now, but it'll come back. But yeah, I mean, it's not really too different. Like the biggest thing as well isn't just like the new cards. We also got Paladin nerfs. I know it's so easy to forget that part. That Paladin hand buff is like completely gone from ladder. Like it really doesn't exist that much. The tiny info that we can see on hand buff Paladin looks pretty not good. Like at a completely scuffed guess, I would say it's probably just below that or around that 50% win rate, which is a massive fall from where it was. So it'll probably be still playable, but yeah, those multiple nerfs have kind of done their damage there. But yeah, apart from that, it's mostly the same kind of meta that we saw prior to the expansion launch, where a whole bunch of aggressive decks are good. We kind of know what those are. And then now we have Shaman kind of hanging out. And we'll see how things go once Warlock, you know, once the ban happens, and you know, things probably slow down a little bit.
Yeah, so back to a kind of Dark Lair meta with Shaman. Like,
yeah, maybe some Shaman mixed in. I mean, Shaman can actually handle that matchup pretty well because of the Toxfin. Like, if you're... Again, what you were saying with, like, the Primal Dungeoneer and how it just tutors a spell, I really like running very, very few spells in those decks where it can be, like, just 2 nature spells and the Ice Fishing. And that, or like, maybe a little bit more than that if you're running, like, you know, Galakron, then you run, like, 2 Frost, 2 Nature, Ice Fishing. Because that just means that your Ice Fishing is really consistently drawn. And, like, that's the most powerful thing you can do in Shaman. It's the most powerful thing, like, one of the most powerful things you can do in Wild. And the fact that you do have that, like, little half tutor for it is pretty nuts. So
it reminds me a lot of, like, Bear of Risky with Ankar, right? Except this is just, like, it tutors both pieces, right? I don't know. God, I can't stop gushing about Shaman. I'm so excited about it. Like, I'm a little bit sad about Handbuff Paladin. You know, like it finally got its time in the limelight, and then like boom, hit with like 6 different nerfs. And poor bodybuilder, man. That's all I gotta say. I know you guys were like he had his time in the light, but damn, dude, it feels really bad to have your favorite deck get gutted like that. Like absolutely gutted.
It really
I
did get
suffered.
gutted.
I got 8 PM mage nerfed me out. Come on, I've suffered. I know the feeling. And we move on. We never forget though the fun times that we played Hand of Adal on turn 2. The fun.
Yeah,
memories.
I was gonna say like the first day of school is the obvious like hard hit, but the subtle change to Hand of Adal just feels bad. That extra health really matters in
It looks
terms of
weird.
yeah, it looks
like when
weird.
you see it on the board, it looks strange.
It looks weird, and like the health gave you the ability to dictate trades so cleanly that like it's a good card still because it does a lot of things and it draws you a card, but it is significantly worse just losing that one extra hit point. I think that might have been more impactful than losing an extra attack just because you can value trade less frequently and like it used to replace itself and then allow that minion to go maybe 2 or 3 for 1. Now if it's only going 1 for 1, you're getting a little bit less off of it. So probably a necessary change, both for standard and wild, because I mean Handbuff Paladin was pretty
Not
outrageous.
necessary for wild. Don't do that. Not necessary for wild.
Do we need to go back to the most recent VS report?
My Libram Paladin, dude. Okay, Handbuff Paladin got hit enough. I played Libram Paladin, and I played a Hand of Adal on a 1/3, and it just looked so wrong seeing a 3/4 Aldor Attendant. Like, I really wish that it was like +1/+2, like you mentioned. I think just the extra health would have been so much nicer. But also, it looks so weird to see these like cycle of 2-mana buff cards and it not be +2/+2. Like, I think that's the thing that throws me off. Where like I just keep looking at it and I'm like, this is just ugly. I can't.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys were playing when Novice Engineer got nerfed, but it was kind of the similar feeling. It's just like, why does it look this way? Why is there 1 less health than there should be on this card? Like, and similarly, it took the card from like literally being an auto include in every deck to just almost unplayable outside of like specific combo decks. So 1 health makes a real big difference in
there was a really good line in the last standard VS report where it was like up is down, down is up, Shaman is Paladin, and Paladin is Shaman, and that's just kind of a good summary of where we're at after the the nerfs and things like that. Paladin standard looks pretty not great. Like it has a couple decks that are tier 3. They're okay. I doubt they'll like revert anything. But they might have gone a little too hard on Paladin.
Yeah.
They might have been a little, maybe just the first day or third day, or Hand of Adal. They probably didn't need to do both. But it makes sense. They didn't want Paladin still be running around at dominant, so they didn't want to take that risk. With the mini set.
Yeah, and like in wild, Odd Paladin is still a very good.
Yeah.
So
it's
not
really
like
good
the
at
class.
that.
It's not like the class is dead in wild. It's doing just fine.
Yeah, I think Tax Paladin also a super underrated deck, by the way. We haven't talked about it in a while, but the Aggro Rally Pally, best named deck in Hearthstone.
That got Hand of Adal nerfed as well, so I
know. I do think that it's still really good. Like, you run Call to Arms.
Yeah, you're more likely
Right.
You're running Call to Arms, and you're more likely just to want to like shove a mini bot onto than buff a Righteous Protector anyway. So I think that the deck honestly probably doesn't get hit quite as, because it really is fairly limited in terms of its turn 1 plays anyway. So just by nature of not wanting to dilute the Call to Arms pool too much. So I think it's still probably well positioned, but yeah, I mean nerfs hurt regardless of how relatively small they are. They still you make a card in a deck worse, the deck gets worse.
All right, so that's gonna wrap up our conversation about the meta. And again, we have a ban coming Wednesday. It'll be interesting to see if it kind of reverts back to what we were thinking, right? With Dark Lord dominating the format again, and a bunch of decks kind of doing a variety of strategies behind it, or does the Shaman inclusion to the metagame kind of shake things up more than we might be expecting? Who knows? Time will tell. Wednesday can't get here soon enough. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for our podcast this week. We appreciate all of you guys listening all the way through to the end. And again, Corbett and Roffle, thank you again for joining me. Let the people know where they can find you guys.
You can find me at RoffleHS on Twitter and Instagram, and at Roffle on Twitch and YouTube.
And guys, you can find me at Corbettgames on Twitter, Twitch, yeah, YouTube, totally. Lots of videos on that platform. But thank you guys very much. Make sure, come join the Discord and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. To continue with this podcast community Discord, make sure you guys join that. Of course, check out our patreon.com/stateofthewild if you guys want to support the content even further. Appreciate all of you guys for checking it out week after week. Don't forget about the tournament coming next weekend. It's also our 50th episode, which is kind of insane, right? Like, Corbett's been on for 45 episodes. Roffle's been on for about 5 next week, right? It's gonna be a fun. We'll figure out something special for 50, or maybe we'll do 51 just to be weird and unique like that. We'll see. But yeah, we appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, not only all the way to the end of this episode, but for 49 great episodes. In the past. Appreciate all of you guys for hanging out, and we hope you guys, are enjoying the Wild Hearthstone meta and are looking forward to this nerf shaking things up again. And we will see you guys again next week. All right, later.